I was driving along Route 66 that afternoon, my old Chevy humming steady beneath my hands, when I saw her. Not a woman, no, though Lord knows women have crossed my memory plenty, but a truck. A big rig, chrome catching the sun, the kind of sight that never fails to make my heart tighten. The moment I saw that 18-wheeler barreling toward me, my chest filled with a feeling I hadn't had in years. It was as if the past came roaring back, diesel smoke and rubber on asphalt, the long hum of tires against the endless American highways. That sight cracked something open inside me, a door I thought I'd closed when I turned in my keys for the last time. 65 years old now, retired. I tell myself I'm content. Yard work, little fishing, coffee at the diner with the same fellas every Thursday morning. But the truth is I still carry the road inside me. You don't just stop being a trucker. You don't just forget the miles, the smells of roadside diners. The way truck stops at 2 a.m. had a language all their own. Seeing that rig today pulled me straight back, not just to the years behind the wheel, but to where it all began. Back to a kid standing barefoot in a dusty yard in Indiana, smelling gasoline on his father's hands. My old man worked in a repair shop, grease under his nails, his shirts never coming clean no matter how hard Mom scrubbed them. I'd sat on the curb watching him fix engines with the kind of patience I never had, listening to the sound of ratchets clicking, smelling the heavy mix of oil, dust, and sweat. That's where it started. The love of machines, of engines that rumbled like they had a heartbeat of their own. Back then, America was a different place. The neighbors knew your name. Kids rode their bikes until the streetlights came on, and no one worried much about locking doors. We were poor, sure, but I didn't know it. Life was full of small things. The creak of a porch swing, the crackle of a baseball game on the radio, the taste of cold Coca-Cola from a glass bottle after mowing lawns for 50 cents. School never fit me right. I sat at those desks, staring out the window at the road stretching beyond the cornfields, thinking of where they might lead. Teachers told me I'd end up nowhere if I didn't study harder. Maybe they were half right. But by 16, I was already sneaking into Dad's truck, my hands on the wheel, dreaming of places I'd never seen. That dream became my life. And standing here, 65, with more years behind me than ahead, I can still smell the leather of those first truck seats, still feel the way my palms sweated when I took my first real haul across state lines. Today, seeing that rig roll toward me, I realized I need to tell this story. Not just for me, but maybe for anyone who still believes the road can shape a man's soul. So, if you'll stick with me, I'll take you back to when the highways were new, when America felt like it was still being built mile by mile, and when I was just a boy becoming a man behind the wheel of a truck. I still remember the day I climbed into a rig for the first time, not as a passenger, not sneaking around my father's yard, but as a driver. It was 1977. I was 19, restless, tired of factory shifts that smelled of metal shavings and stale sweat. My buddy Rick had been driving for a small freight outfit, and he told me they were short on hands. He said, "You can handle a stick shift, you can handle a rig." He wasn't lying, but Lord, he wasn't telling the whole truth either. That first time, I felt like I was trying to tame a beast. The cab was bigger than my first apartment. The seat springs squeaked every time I shifted my weight. The dashboard looked like something out of a spaceship. Gauges, switches, knobs. And the smell. Diesel, rubber, and that faint mix of stale coffee and cigarette smoke that clung to every truck I ever knew. I put my hands on the wheel, leather worn smooth from 100 other men before me, and I swear my pulse slowed. The road stretched out in front of me like it was waiting for me. My first haul was nothing special, just paper products, stacked high and bound for Ohio. But to me, it was everything.
Crossing those state lines, I felt freedom I'd never known before. I rolled down the window, let the wind slap my face, and watched America roll by like a movie. Barns leaning tired against the wind. Little towns with diners promising best pie in the county. Gas stations with attendants who wiped your windshield for a smile and a tip. And the radio. The radio was my companion. Back then it was country twang and rock and roll bleeding through static. Waylon Jennings singing about being a ramblin' man, and me believing every word of it. But it wasn't all romance. The road was long, the hours brutal. That first year, I learned what it meant to fight fatigue, to keep my eyes open when the world outside was black and the only light came from my headlights carving through the dark. I learned how your body aches from sitting too long, how your back stiffens, and how loneliness creeps in when you park at a rest stop miles from anyone you love. Yet I also learned the brotherhood. Truckers nodding at each other on the road, CB radios buzzing with voices that kept you awake, jokes traded across frequencies like lifelines. Rick once told me, "You'll never be alone out here." Not really. You've got the road, the rig, and the rest of us. And damn if he wasn't right. I was young then, too young to understand how those first miles would shape the rest of my life. Too young to see the sacrifices that were already waiting for me down the line. All I knew was that I was hooked. The road had claimed me. Looking back now, 65 years old, I realized something. That was the beginning of my real education. Not the one from chalkboards and textbooks, but the one from highways, strangers, and the hum of an engine that carried me farther than I ever dreamed I'd go. There's something about the night that never leaves a trucker. Even now, when I wake in the small hours and shuffle to the kitchen for a glass of water, I sometimes half expect to hear the hum of tires under me, the steady vibration of the cab, the CB radio crackling with voices from men I'll never see. In those first years, the nights were both my enemy and my teacher. I'd grip the wheel tight, eyes burning, the headlights carving out just enough of the road to make me wonder what shadows were hiding beyond. The smell inside the cab was always the same. A mix of diesel fumes, burnt coffee from the thermos, and the faint musk of sweat and leather. I can close my eyes right now and smell it as clear as if I'd never left. There were lonely nights, no doubt about it. The kind where the highway stretched on like it had no end, where the only movement was the occasional glow of another rig passing the opposite way. Our headlights flashing at each other like old friends saying, "You still out here too, brother?" But there were nights of beauty too. Nights where the stars spilled across the sky so thick it looked like spilled salt. Nights where I'd pull off at some quiet shoulder, kill the engine, and just listen to the silence, to the crickets, to my own thoughts bouncing around in my head. That's where I learned the road wasn't just about hauling freight. It was about carrying your own solitude, learning how to sit with yourself when the world had gone quiet. And then there was the brotherhood. The CB radio was our lifeline. We'd talk in handles and nicknames like Smoky Watch and Midnight Rambler and Cornbread. I went by Iron Horse for a while, though, looking back, I think it sounded more dramatic than I ever was. We traded jokes, weather reports, warnings about cops hiding in the grass, and sometimes just words to keep each other awake. I'll never forget one night in Kentucky, rain hammering the windshield so hard I could barely see the stripes on the road. My hands were locked on the wheel, my chest tight with fear. Then a voice came through the CB. "Keep her steady, Iron Horse. I'm right behind you. You won't lose me." I never saw that man's face, never knew his real name, but he stayed with me mile for mile, talking me through until the storm broke and dawn painted the hills. When I finally pulled into a truck stop, he honked twice, waved, and kept rolling. That's the kind of thing outsiders never understand. On the road, strangers become brothers, if only for a night. But of course, nights on the highway also meant sacrifice. While I was out chasing miles, life back home was moving without me. Birthdays missed, holidays spent in the cab with a gas station sandwich instead of family. I didn't see it then, not fully. But those nights were the first cracks in the life I'd thought I'd build off the road. Still, that 21, 22, none of that mattered. What mattered was the open road, the freedom, and the belief that tomorrow's load would take me somewhere new. And back then, that was enough. I met her on a layover in Nashville. Funny how the big things in life sneak up on you when you're just trying to grab a hot meal and a shower. I'd been running a long haul from St. Louis, hauling auto parts, dead tired, my back aching from hours in the seat. I rolled into a diner with neon lights buzzing like tired bees, the kind of place where the coffee is always hot but never really good. She was my waitress, brown hair tied back, smile that could stop a man mid-sentence. I remember she had a little smudge of flour on her cheek, like she'd been helping in the kitchen. "You look like you could use a slice of pie," she said, setting down my coffee. And just like that, I was hooked. Her name was Laura. I found excuses to swing through Nashville on my routes, timing my hauls so I could land there every few weeks. At first, it was small talk. Her asking about the road, me asking about her dreams. But the more we talked, the harder it was to leave. I'd sit across from her in that booth, the jukebox humming soft country tunes, and I'd start to wonder if maybe the road wasn't the only thing worth chasing. It wasn't long before she agreed to see me outside the diner. A walk by the river, a drive down back roads, nights spent talking until sunrise. She laughed easy, the kind of laugh that makes you feel like you've known someone longer than you have. And she listened, really listened. Most folks heard truck driver and thought that was the whole story. But she asked about my childhood, my dreams, the parts of me I hadn't thought about since I left Indiana. We married in '81. I still remember the small church, the smell of old wood and hymnals, my hands sweating worse than they ever did behind the wheel. Rick, my old buddy, was my best man, cracking jokes to hide the tears in his eyes. Laura wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, but when she walked down that aisle, I swear she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. But marrying a trucker isn't easy. Not then, not now. I'd leave for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes a month, and she'd hold the fort alone. Bills, groceries, fixing things that broke. And when kids came along, 2 boys, born just a couple years apart, she
carried the weight of both parents while I was out running freight. I missed first steps, first words, even a birthday or two. I'd bring back gifts, tiny toy trucks, postcards from towns they'd never seen, but gifts don't make up for an empty chair at the dinner table. I told myself I was providing, that every mile I drove was for them. And it was true, but it was also true that the road had me in its grip, and I wasn't ready to let go. There were arguments, nights when Laura's voice cracked over the phone, telling me she was tired of being married to a ghost. And there were moments I sat in the cab staring at their pictures taped to the dash, wondering if I'd made the wrong choice somewhere along the line. Still, love found a way. Letters tucked in my duffel bag, phone calls stolen from payphones at truck stops, kids running to me when I finally came home. Those moments, small, fleeting, were the glue that held us together. Looking back now, 65 years old, I see it clear. I gave the road the best of me, and my family had to share what was left. Yet, somehow, they loved me anyway. And that love, as messy and imperfect as it was, became the one cargo I carried with the most care. By the mid-'80s, I was in my stride. The boys were still young. Laura had learned to run the household like a captain steering a ship, and I was running miles like they'd never end. I'd finally worked my way into a company with decent rigs, newer models with sleeper cabs that didn't creak like old barns. To me, those years were the golden stretch of trucking, before everything started changing, before the regulations piled up, before the computers, before the world sped past us like we were relics.
I was hauling everything. Produce from California, steel out of Pittsburgh, furniture from North Carolina. You name it, I probably pulled it. And with every load came new towns, new diners, new faces. Truck stops were more than pit stops back then. They were communities. You'd walk in, boots thudding on the tile, the smell of frying bacon and burnt coffee hitting you like a wall, and half the room would nod at you. Didn't matter if you knew each other. You were a trucker. That was enough. I had friends scattered across the map, guys with calloused hands and sunburned necks, each with their own handle. There was Bluebird, who sang old gospel hymns over the CB to keep drivers awake. Long Haul Larry, who could talk for hours about baseball stats. And Texas Red, a wiry fellow with a laugh that could cut through the deepest fatigue. We weren't family in the blood sense, but we looked out for each other. Convoys through icy mountains, keeping an eye on the rigs behind us, sharing sandwiches when a man's wallet was thin. And let me tell you, those years tested you. Winter roads in Wyoming that turned into ice sheets overnight, black ice hiding under a dusting of snow. I can still feel the wheel jerking under my hands as the trailer pushed me sideways, heart pounding, praying under my breath. Summers out in Arizona, where the heat shimmered on the pavement, and the cab felt like an oven, sweat soaking my shirt till the steering wheel slipped in my grip. And the loneliness. Well, that was its own weather system. Some days it pressed down harder than the heaviest load. But the pride, that carried me through. Pulling into a warehouse at dawn, unloading freight that towns depended on. Folks don't always think about it, but every loaf of bread, every chair, every bolt and nail, some trucker hauled it. We kept America fed, built, and moving. I like to think I was part of something bigger, a steel vein pumping life into the country. At home, it was harder. Laura grew tired, the boys grew restless. They wanted me at baseball games, school plays, Sunday dinners, and sometimes I was there. But more often, I was a face in a Polaroid, a voice on the phone line. It hurt
knowing I was missing their childhood in exchange for mile markers and freight bills. Yet when I walked through the door after a long haul, the way my boys' faces lit up, it made the sacrifices feel worth it, at least for a while. Those golden years taught me that trucking was more than a job. It was an identity, a calling. The road was both my companion and my competitor, demanding everything, but giving me a sense of belonging I couldn't find anywhere else. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can hear it, the low rumble of the engine, the endless ribbon of highway stretching toward the horizon, promising that the next mile might be the best one yet. The road was good to me, but it was never gentle on my family. By the early 90s, the boys were teenagers, full of questions I wasn't around to answer. Laura had learned to live like a single mother most of the time, juggling bills, broken faucets, and 2 boys who were taller every time I came home. I remember once rolling into the driveway after 3 weeks on the road. My younger boy, Tommy, was out front shooting hoops. I barely recognized him. He had a deeper voice, broader shoulders, like he'd aged years in my absence. He didn't run to me like he used to. He just nodded, almost shy, like I was a visitor instead of his father. That one stung deep. Laura and I argued more in those days. She'd sit across from me at the kitchen table, arms folded, eyes tired. "You're missing them grow up," she said once, her voice breaking. "You're missing me." And she was right. God, she was right. But when I tried to explain the pride I felt in providing, the belief that every mile I drove was food on the table, clothes on their backs, it always sounded hollow once it left my mouth. Because money can't hug your kids. Money can't hold your wife when she's crying herself to sleep. Still, I couldn't quit. The road had its hooks in me. And truth was, part of me was afraid. Afraid that if I stayed home too long, I wouldn't know how to be that man. The one who sat in a chair all day. The one who lived without the hum of the highway under his feet. And the industry was changing too. More rules, more electronic logs, less of that freedom that had once defined us. The CB chatter wasn't as alive as it had been. Truck stops started feeling less like brotherhood and more like sterile pit stops. It was as if the soul of trucking was fading, mile by mile. I tried to make up for it in little ways. Souvenirs for the boys, baseball caps, T-shirts, patches from towns across the map. Love letters for Laura, scribbled at rest stops in the dim glow of fluorescent lights. And sometimes when I was home, I'd sit on the porch with her, holding her hand, promising I'd do better. But the next dispatch always came, and I always answered it.
One night, parked at a rest area in Pennsylvania, I stared at their pictures taped to the dash. The boys in Little League uniforms. Laura smiling with her arm around them. For the first time, the road felt heavy. Not the load in the trailer, not the miles ahead, but the weight of what I was losing back home. That was when the cracks in my life started to show. And like asphalt baking under the sun, once the cracks appear, they only spread. By the mid-90s, my boys were almost grown. Michael, the eldest, had a temper like his mother's when she was tired, sharp and quick. Tommy, younger by just a couple of years, had a quieter stubbornness, the kind that simmered under the surface until it boiled over. I saw them only in bursts, weekends when the dispatcher gave me a break, holidays when the miles finally stopped calling. And in those brief moments, I realized something that shook me more than any storm on the highway ever could. The distance between us wasn't just miles. I tried. God knows I tried. I'd buy them gifts, sit through awkward dinners, try to ask about school or girlfriends or baseball. But they'd answer in short sentences,
polite but cold. The laughter we used to share when they were small, the pure, easy kind, was gone. It had been replaced by polite smiles and measured words. I could feel it pressing against my chest every time I climbed back into the cab. It was a lesson in loneliness I hadn't expected. Out on the road, you're alone, sure, but there's comfort in the routine, in the rhythm of the tires and the hum of the engine. At home, the silence had no rhythm. It pressed down. It made me question whether all the miles I'd driven, all the sacrifices I'd made, had been worth it. And yet, there were sparks. One Christmas, I found Michael's hand-scribbled little note and slipped it into the box of tools I'd sent him. "Thanks, Dad. I know you care." I stared at that paper in the dim light of the truck stop bathroom, and I cried like I hadn't since Laura put me in a truck for that first haul. Tommy wasn't far behind. One summer, he climbed into the passenger seat for a short ride to show me a project he'd built, a homemade go-kart that ran like a dream. For a few hours, we were back to those early years, laughing at bumps, teasing each other, sharing stories. And in those moments, I remembered why I fought the road so hard. For them. Still, the road never stopped calling. Dispatches kept coming, miles had to be driven, loads had to be delivered. And each time I returned home, the clock was ticking on another missed milestone, another birthday, another, "I wish you'd been there." It was the first real test of my heart, the one that showed me the cost of chasing freedom and pride. The road had given me identity, purpose, even joy. But it had also stolen pieces of my family, of my home, in ways I could never fully reclaim. And yet, deep down, I also knew something else. I had to keep moving, because stopping wasn't really an option. Not yet. Not until I had earned the right to look back without regret. By the late 90s, I had been driving for more than 20 years. The road had carved lines into my face, gray streaks into my hair, and stories into my hands that no one could read but me. And yet, in that time, I'd earned something I hadn't expected. Respect. Not the kind you get from a paycheck or from flashing a rig's lights at a fellow driver, but the quiet acknowledgement that comes from a life lived fully in a profession that few understand. At truck stops, younger drivers would nod at me, some even tipping their hats. "Iron horse," they'd say over the CB, their voices a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "You've been on these roads longer than some of us have been alive." It was humbling. There were no medals, no ceremonies, just the simple recognition from men who understood the weight of the wheel, the loneliness of the long haul, and the pride of a job done well. I'd helped them navigate a storm, lent advice on maintenance, or just sat in a diner booth, swapping stories of highways and small towns. That camaraderie, the one forged in diesel and asphalt, meant more than I could have imagined when I first climbed behind the wheel. I also began to feel a quiet gratitude from strangers, too. Warehouse managers who knew me by name, grocery store clerks who always had a cup of coffee ready, farmers who trusted me to deliver their goods safely. It was subtle, but it filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in the younger years when the road had seemed only a lonely companion.
Even as my family had grown distant at times, those moments of recognition reminded me why I had chosen this life. I wasn't just driving, I was carrying the country on my back, mile by mile. And in doing so, I had become part of a network, a lifeline that kept cities stocked, towns alive,
and people fed. Still, the road demanded everything it had always demanded. Ice storms in Minnesota, construction delays on the interstates, mechanical failures that had me sweating under the hood at midnight. Yet I met each challenge with the same determination I'd felt on my first solo run. Every successful haul, every grateful nod, every safe arrival made the lonely nights worth it. And when I finally returned home after long hauls, I noticed subtle changes. My boys, now young men, began sharing stories, asking about places I'd been. Laura, too, softened, her tired eyes glimmering with pride at the man I had become. Not perfect, never perfect, but steadfast, reliable, and full of love that had endured miles and years. It was in these years that I began to understand something crucial. Respect, gratitude, and legacy aren't measured in time off the road. They're built mile by mile, load by load, heart by heart. And for the first time, I felt that I had truly earned mine. I knew the day would come, though I didn't want to admit it. Even as I pushed 60, the road still called, its pull as strong as ever. But the aches in my back, the stiffness in my knees, the little aches that whispered, "Slow down, old man," they were becoming impossible to ignore. My final long haul came on a crisp autumn morning. I was hauling machinery from Detroit to Atlanta, a route I had run countless times before. The air smelled sharp with fall, and the cab smelled faintly of old leather, coffee, and that lingering diesel scent that never truly leaves a trucker. The radio crackled with old hits from the 70s and 80s, songs I knew by heart, each note tugging at memories of younger days, fast friendships, and nights under endless stars. The miles rolled beneath me like a familiar heartbeat. I passed towns I'd visited hundreds of times, but they all felt different that day, more vivid, more precious. I thought of Rick, gone now, and all the others who had been companions in this life, who'd taught me the subtle poetry of the road. I thought of Laura and the boys, how far they had come and how much I had missed. That last stretch was a mix of exhilaration and quiet sorrow. I waved at a younger trucker going the opposite direction, CB crackling briefly, and for a moment it felt like the past and present had met on the asphalt. I had done this life well, I told myself. I had carried my loads, my family, and my pride with as much care as I could muster. By the time I rolled into Atlanta, the sun was setting, painting the horizon gold and crimson. The warehouse manager shook my hand, thanked me sincerely for the safe delivery, and I felt something swell in my chest, a mix of relief, pride, and finality. For the first time, I parked the rig and sat there, just listening to the engine tick down, the quiet settling around me. No hurry, no miles to chase, just the fading hum of tires and the satisfaction of a life lived on the road in the best way I knew. I realized then that trucking had been more than a job. It had been my identity, my teacher, my companion. It had given me freedom, shaped my character, and, in its own stubborn way, defined my entire life. And now, as I climbed out of the cab for the last time, I felt a calm I hadn't known in decades. The road would always be a part of me, but it was time to step off. And for the first time in 65 years, I felt the peace of having done it all and having done it well. Retirement hit in a way I hadn't anticipated. No more early mornings at truck stops, no more miles to chase, no more hum of the engine beneath me. At first, it felt strange, like stepping off a moving train while the world kept rolling without me. I had to learn a new rhythm, one without the constant tug of highways and dispatch calls. The first mornings were quiet, almost too quiet. I'd sit on the porch, coffee in hand, listening to the wind through the trees instead of tires on asphalt. The boys were grown now, lives of their own, and Laura moved with a slower grace, her smile still warm but tinged with years of managing life without me around. I realized I had to rebuild my connection to them, not with miles or deliveries, but with presence. I started small, walks with Laura, trips to the farmer's market, even teaching Tommy how to fix an old engine in the garage, passing along some of what I'd learned over decades on the road. And slowly, the distance began to shrink. The boys laughed again like they did when they were small, teasing me about gray hairs and old habits, and I felt my heart stretch wide with gratitude. I even found joy in simple things I had long ignored: gardening, early morning walks in the crisp air, listening to music without the roar of the highway in the background. I wrote letters to old friends, some still driving rigs, some retired like me, sharing stories of the road, the adventures, the lessons, the loss, and the laughter. And sometimes, when dusk fell and the sky turned gold, I'd walk down to the driveway, touch the old Chevy, and feel a pang of longing. But it was different now, not achful, but fond, like remembering an old friend. I knew the road would always be a part of me, and I carried it in my heart rather than under my wheels. Looking back, I realize I wouldn't change a thing. The missed birthdays, the long nights, the storms, and the solitude, they were all part of the journey. And in the end, I am grateful. Grateful for the miles, for the friendships, for the family that endured, for a life that was full, rich, and real. I may be 65, and I may walk a different path now, but I walk it with a quiet pride, a soft smile, and a heart that knows it has truly lived. And every so often, when I hear the distant hum of a rig on the highway, I close my eyes and ride along one last time, free as I ever was. Even in retirement, the memories never stop moving. Sometimes I'll be sipping my coffee in the early morning light, and a single sound, tires on wet asphalt, the distant rumble of a rig, the clang of a truck stop bell, will pull me back decades. I can feel the hum of the engine, the vibration in my hands, the scent of diesel and coffee and rubber, and suddenly I'm 18 years old again, gripping the wheel for the first time, heart pounding with a mix of fear and freedom. I walk down memory lane often, and it's full of color, smell, and sound. I remember the diner in Oklahoma where the pancakes were always too big and the coffee always too strong. I remember a night in Missouri when I and a handful of other truckers stayed awake through a storm, singing old songs to keep our minds sharp. I remember the ache in my back after a 12-hour haul, the pride of delivering steel on time, and the camaraderie of men who became family through shared miles and midnight stories. These memories bring both joy and a bittersweet ache. I realize how much the road shaped me, not just as a trucker, but as a husband, a father, and a man. Each mile carried lessons in patience, resilience, and humility. Each stop reminded me that the world is bigger than my own worries, and that kindness, even in a fleeting nod or a shared joke over the CB radio, can leave an imprint that lasts a lifetime. And sometimes I take a drive, just a short one now, because I don't have to chase miles anymore. I'll roll past familiar stretches of highway the same way I used to, and I'll let the wheel guide me as the memories flow freely. The road whispers its old secrets, and I listen, smiling, feeling alive in the way only a man who has truly loved and lived the highway can feel. I've learned that life, like the road, moves fast, unexpected,
and unpredictable. And all you can do is hold on, keep your hands steady, and enjoy the journey. Retirement gave me something I hadn't felt in decades: time. Time to be present, truly present, with Laura, the boys, and now with the grandchildren I'd only seen in snapshots and videos while hauling freight across the country. Those little faces, bright, curious, and full of energy, reminded me of the small joys I had missed in their fathers' childhoods. I started simple. Afternoons in the yard, teaching the boys' kids how to throw a baseball, how to ride a bike without training wheels, how to fix a squeaky hinge on a door. And they listened, really listened, the way children do when you have the patience to show them. Their laughter echoed like music, filling spaces in my heart that I hadn't realized were empty. Laura and I took long walks, hand in hand, sharing stories about the road and life, laughter mixing with the quiet comfort of years spent together. I told her about the first time I drove solo, about storms that shook me to my core, about men who became brothers through radio waves and diesel fumes. She smiled, sometimes teary-eyed, knowing that even in my absence all those years, I had carried her and the boys in my heart.
There were also small reconciliations. Michael admitted, one evening over coffee, that he had been angry at me for missing milestones, but that he understood now how much I had sacrificed to provide. Tommy, quieter but no less affected, hugged me after I helped him fix an old lawnmower, whispering, "I get it now, Dad." Those moments, the laughter, the hugs, the quiet confessions, were better than any long haul I'd ever driven. The road had given me freedom, pride, and identity, but family gave me purpose, joy, and peace. I realized that the miles I'd traveled had led me not just across America, but back home to the people who mattered most. And in that presence, in those smiles, I felt a completeness that the highway had never fully given me. Even now, in the quiet of retirement, the road speaks to me. It whispers in the rustle of leaves along the highway, in the distant rumble of a rig passing by, in the scent of diesel carried on a gust of wind. Memories return, sharp and vivid, like they're happening all over again. I think of the first time I drove across the country, windows down, radio blasting, heart pounding with excitement and fear. I remember the storms that made me grip the wheel like my life depended on it, and the calm nights under star-lit skies where the world seemed endless and I felt truly free. I remember the friends I made in diners, on rest stops, in convoys, men who became brothers in ways no one else could understand. There were losses too. Rick, who laughed so easily, gone too soon. Truckers I'd watched come and go, some retiring, some moving on, some taken by life's unpredictability. Each loss left a hollow space, yet also a gratitude for the time we had shared. And the lessons? The patience, the resilience, the understanding that life is a journey, not a destination. I learned that in every mile, in every load, in every quiet night on the road. The highway was harsh, lonely, and demanding, but it also taught me who I was, what I valued, and how to persevere when the world felt heavy. Now when I see a rig rolling down the interstate, I smile and nod, just as I did years ago over the CB. It's a silent acknowledgement of a life lived fully, of a profession that shaped me, of freedom that no paycheck or promotion could ever replicate. The road will always be part of me, a thread woven into the fabric of my soul, and I carry it with pride, peace, and an enduring sense of wonder. With retirement, I found a new joy, sharing my stories. The boys, now men with families of their own, listened with a mix of curiosity and amusement. The grandchildren, wide-eyed and full of questions, were my favorite audience. They wanted to know about the big truck Grandpa drove, the strange towns, the diners with the best pie, the nights under endless stars when the world seemed to stretch forever. I told them about the lessons the road had taught me, patience in the face of challenges, the value of kindness even to strangers, and the importance of holding on to your integrity no matter how far the miles carry you. I shared the mistakes I had made, the times I missed birthdays and holidays, the arguments with Laura, and the quiet moments of regret. But I also shared the triumphs, the friendships, the pride of a job done well, and the joy of knowing that the life I had lived, though imperfect, had been mine. Sometimes we'd sit in the yard as the sun set, trucks passing on the distant highway, and I'd watch their eyes light up. I realized then that my stories were more than entertainment. They were bridges. Bridges between past and present, between the lessons of my life and the paths they were beginning to walk. Laura would often stand nearby, watching quietly, and I could see the pride in her eyes. Despite the years I'd spent away, despite the miles that had once kept us apart, we had built something enduring. Our love had survived the road, and now it became part of the legacy I shared. Passing these stories on gave me a sense of peace I hadn't expected. The road had given me freedom, identity, and pride, but teaching the next generation gave me something deeper, connection. And in that connection, I could finally see that all those miles, all those sacrifices, had meaning beyond the engine hum and asphalt stretches. Now, at 65, I sit on the porch with Laura beside me, the boys visiting when they can, the grandchildren running in the yard like little bursts of sunlight. The hum of the highway is faint in the distance, a gentle reminder of the life that shaped me, the freedom I once chased, and the miles that taught me who I am. I think back on my journey, the boy from Indiana who dreamed of open roads, the young man gripping a wheel for the first time, the husband and father struggling to balance love and duty, the trucker earning respect mile by mile. Every storm, every lonely night, every laugh, every tear, they've all led me here. There's peace in this reflection, a profound satisfaction. I see the smiles of my family, hear the laughter of the grandchildren, and I feel the echo of friendships forged in diners and on highways long gone. I am grateful for the road, for the lessons, for the love that endured despite distance, for the memories that remain as vivid as the day they were made. I've learned that life, like trucking, is a journey. It's unpredictable, demanding, sometimes lonely, but it's also full of beauty, connection, and meaning. And in the end, it's the people we love, the moments we cherish, and the legacy we leave that define us, not the miles we've traveled. I smile, looking out at the horizon, knowing that I've lived a life true to myself. The road was long, winding, and sometimes harsh, but it gave me everything I needed. And now I am home, finally at peace, my heart full, my spirit free.
The engine hum is quiet now, replaced by laughter, conversation, and the gentle rhythm of life itself. And I am happy, truly happy, knowing I lived fully, loved deeply, and carried the road within me, always.